G'day and welcome to the Fred Paul Show on ADH TV. Well, there are many ironies that are unique to our times. Some of them are alarming, like the fact that our medical industry wants to make us sick and our schools and universities want to make us stupid. So we should be grateful for this small mercy, that at least one of the ironies of our times is more funny than it is alarming. It is the increasing number of people, mostly from the rabid left side of politics, it must be noted, who want to use free speech to tell the rest of us to shut up. This was on full display outside a theatre in Sydney, hosting Conservative commentator and world-leading defender of Israel, Douglas Murray, yesterday, which I was lucky enough to attend. I could hear this shrieking rabble from 100 metres away. Outside the theatre itself, it was an absolute cacophony. Naturally, I decided to get some of this down on video, as any journalist would. Also, like any journalist, I was interested to know what these people were trying to achieve. My first attempt to ask this didn't get far, and apologies in advance for the sound quality. There was a lot of background noise.
Can I ask you what you're trying to achieve here?
To stop people from dying, Israel's committing a lot of war crimes.
Isn't Hamas's fault?
No, started 55 years ago.
How many years ago?
Shame and more theatre, shame! Shame and more theatre, shame! Shame and more theatre, shame!
So then I went along the line asking the same question and came close to having what I was expecting to be a civil conversation with a protester.
Shame and more theatre, shame! Shame and more theatre, shame! Ceasefire!
Hi, can I ask you what you're trying to achieve here?
Ceasefire now!
You're very loud. Hi, can I ask you what you're trying to achieve here, mate?
Firstly, who are you and where are you from?
Oh, I'm from ADH TV. My name's Fred Paul.
Okay, cool.
But then this happened.
Interview people?
You're antagonising them, mate. You'll be
I'm
receiving
antagonising.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
What? What happened?
The encounter was captured by another live broadcaster who goes by the name of Chris Coveries.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
antagonising them, mate.
Ceasefire now!
You'll be receiving
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
What happened? I was told to move on.
Did you get a move on order?
Antagonising.
Did you get a move on order?
No, I just told to move on.
Oh, that could be a move on order interpreted as such.
All right. My wife is down there. I need to get her so she can get in. I've got her standing there. No, I'm going to. She's down there.
Chris told me that the protest outside the theatre was not even authorised, and yet I was being told to move on simply for asking the protesters questions. This is, in fact, something I do most days of the week. I actually enjoy going out on the streets and asking people their opinions on various topics of the day. This is one way for journalists to not become isolated from the public. And goodness knows there are a lot of journalists these days who spend almost all their professional lives inside newsrooms talking only with people whose life experiences and views on things are almost identical to their own. So it was natural for me to want to know what motivated these people. But the cops wouldn't let me. This is emblematic of the role the state plays in our lives these days. It and its proxies in the corporate world are increasingly in control of our daily movements and are arbiters of what we are allowed to think and say. Douglas Murray himself touched on much of this throughout his speech inside the theatre. He related the story originally told by former Czech President Václav Havel of a shopkeeper in Prague during the Soviet occupation who was forced to hang a sign in his window pronouncing the glory of communism. The point of the sign, Murray said, was not that the shopkeeper believed the sign in his window. Everybody knew he didn't, but that he participated in a lie. And once you participate in one lie, then persuading you to participate in the next becomes relatively easy. The subjugation of the lie is what demoralises us, Murray said. Well, it occurred to me at that point that that is what had happened outside the theatre. The lie being subjugated there was that Australians are equal before the law. Here is me being told to move on. And here are some of the protesters calling for the genocide of the Jewish people. You'll notice that the police are so reluctant to move these protesters that they have closed down the street to allow room to keep them away or separate from the people leaving the event. But when a reporter wants to ask them the perfectly reasonable question of what they are trying to achieve, he is threatened with arrest. The subjugation of the lie is what demoralises us. Every day, we Australians are all expected to swallow the lie that we are equal before the law and that the government's primary objective is to make our lives better. For the record, here is what the police were hoping to achieve.
We're trying not to provoke a situation.
So there goes the assumption that the police are meant to stop people breaking the law. As if anyone believes that anymore. The cops stopped doing that during COVID, if not before. During the so-called COVID pandemic, the New South Wales Police issued more than 33,000 fines to people for not moving on and various other offences while they were outdoors. The Supreme Court of New South Wales later cancelled those fines because the charges didn't provide enough detail of the alleged offence. Not that the police cared about minor details like that. They were the willing foot soldiers of the greatest lie ever told to the Australian public, that COVID was a dangerous disease and that staying indoors would protect you from it. But it's not just the police who are abandoning the rule of law here. The government is doing it too. Have a look at this grab from Channel 9 last week. This is New South Wales Premier Chris Minns responding to a similar protest from pro-Palestinians, which disrupted question time in Parliament.
It should be noted that disrupting question time in parliamentary democracy is not something that we can endorse.
Did you notice that? Minns seemed to come very close to saying that this is not something that we can tolerate, but hesitated and said instead that he couldn't condone it. Minns didn't say this behaviour won't be tolerated because he knows it will. The people who shriek their support for Palestine are given more liberties than the rest of us. The reasons for this are a little opaque, to say the least, but it has much to do with Labor politicians being afraid that if they are seen to be too harsh towards Palestinian sympathisers, then, well, the Greens will snaffle Islamic votes from them at the next election. What non-Muslims think about this is beside the point. Like the protesters outside the theatre in Sydney yesterday, the government just wants people like you and me to shut the hell up. Thankfully, I was able to interview a couple of people at the event yesterday, and including this young bloke who had a thoughtful appreciation for what Douglas Murray had to say.
I think the part about citizenship, immigration, and what Australia and the West values was really informative.
I liked the bit where he said that the subjugation of the lie is what is the most dispiriting thing of our times. He wasn't referring to Australia, but he could have been, couldn't he?
Yeah, that's right. And I guess when he buttressed that with the conversation that he had about the institutions and the role that they play, that it's not the role of the institutions, it's not the role of a librarian to, make you feel guilty about your history.
Now, you're probably one of the youngest people in the audience. How do you feel about your generation? He did say that young people these days are waking up to the bullshit. That's the technical term that he used. How do you feel about your generation?
Well, I mean, maybe a few of them are, but as we look across the road of mainly young people, so virulently protesting free speech, I think it's indicative of how they've been brought up in the institutions.